The BMW X2, the sportier alternative to the X1, is back, and this time it's available with batteries. Yes, this is the iX2, and it's designed for people who want something that's kind of practical, kind of posh, and makes a real statement about its bold design. Oh my God! This is what most people would call a crossover that goes head-to-head with the likes of the Mercedes EQA and Audi Q4 e-tron Sportback. BMW call it a sports activity vehicle with, and I quote, extrovert design. That's one way of describing it, but I'm sure the internet could come up with a few more creative descriptions of its own. Only having a laugh. But when I saw this car in pictures for the first time, a little bit of, yeah, you get the idea. However, in person, I think it looks really quite interesting. I know what you're gonna say, BMW pays you to say that, but no, honestly, in the flesh, it's a lot better looking. The thing is though, it kind of looks like there were lots of different departments responsible for different bits, and they all try to outcompete each other. And also it looks kind of a bit like a Skoda Enyaq almost, but not as good, maybe an Enyaq. Anyway, the guys who did the front were like, let's make it the most interesting thing on the planet. So let's have the coolest DRLs in the world. Let's have some light surrounds on the grille. We don't need a big grille, but let's throw one in down there anyway, and some air curtains. But then the wheel guys were like, well, we can't be outdone by the front guys, so let's have the most interesting wheels on the planet. And look how busy that is. But then the guys at the side were like, well, we're gonna make the most sporty roofline in the world. To hell with the passenger comfort. And then the guys at the back were like, well, we can't be outdone by everyone else, lads. Let's make the most ridiculous spoiler in the world that looks like it came off a Civic Type R, and a bumper that looks like it came off a frickin' spaceship. There is a lot going on, but ultimately, I think it all comes together to make what is quite a beautiful car. Not on camera, you moron, it gets all cancelled. Speaking of money and new cars, head over to Auto Trader to find your brand new 24-plate vehicles to buy at a very reasonable price. In the meantime, let's look at some quick specs, shall we? Prices start at just over 50 grand, which also puts it in direct competition with the Tesla Model Y long range. Except on paper, it doesn't seem quite as good. The iX2 has a smaller 64 kilowatt-hour net battery capacity, giving it a smaller hypothetical WLTP range of between 259 and 279 miles, depending on what size wheels you buy. Smaller equals further. Also, it will recharge at either 7 kilowatts on a home wall box, 11 kilowatts from a high-powered work charger, or 130 kilowatts from a public rapid charge point for 10 to 80% in 29 minutes. All of that is slightly worse than the market-leading Tesla Model Y, but this car does have a lot of redeeming features. But before we come to those, shameless plug, if you want to buy, sell, or lease your next car, Auto Trader can help you with all of the above. And if you're thinking of trading up, we can give you an accurate valuation on what your car might be worth. Check the link in the description down below. For now though, back to this thing. Boot space. The iX2 has a decent amount of it, 525 litres. Flop the back seats down, which you can't do from the boot itself, annoyingly, and you get 1400 litres to the Model Y's 2000 litres. Underneath the bonnet, unfortunately, the iX2 does not have a front trunk. In a Model Y, you get 117 litres of storage, but in this, all you get is a plastic cover, underneath which you'll find a glorious glimpse at the electronics. And I've just noticed some rust. That is definitely rust, or patina, some might say. Doesn't look structural, but it also doesn't look good. Lads, this ain't enough. Rust. To be fair to BMW, we sent our Auto Trader spies to test another example of the iX2, and as you can see from this mobile phone footage, that one didn't come with any rust. But if you buy this car, it might be worth checking under the hood. If you've got a family, then you're going to want to know all about the back of the BMW iX2. And in fairness, it's not too bad. I'm 5'11", and I've got probably about an inch of headroom, and I'd say about 2 or 3 inches of legroom in front of me, but taller passengers will probably struggle. You've got no temperature controls at the back, but you do have 2 USB ports, which is quite useful. And there's no transmission tunnel, which means that it's easy to get in the car and slide across the seats. The only problem is it's quite narrow, which means if you sit on the middle seat, look at that. I mean, there's absolutely no headroom at all in the middle seat. So if you've got giant children or tall passengers, they're going to struggle. The other thing about the width of the rear is that it doesn't have space for a third dedicated seatbelt. You have to actually pull the seatbelt off the roof and then faff about. But yeah, if you got a child whose responsibility is to do the seatbelt themselves, they might struggle with this arrangement. It's not as easy as a normal seatbelt in a standard width car, but you do have a little armrest down here and some cup holders. The other thing I've noticed is that the seats aren't the most comfortable in the world, so maybe you don't buy this if you like your children. But apart from that, yeah, big car, not a lot of space in the back. The front is good, more than good. The interior design is actually quite lush, with lots of variety and thought put into the various materials, making the cabin look and feel more premium than many of its rivals. The screens are large and clear, and there's lots of technology as you'd expect from BMW. There's some quite interesting design going on in the new iX2. This floating center console is fascinating because it means you can put your handbags and your purses underneath without them getting in the way of the center console. The cup holders are in a sensible place. Same thing goes for the USB-C ports. And I like the way they've integrated the wireless phone charger. All you do is you put it on the pad and then clamp it in place so it doesn't fly all around, which is quite a reassuring thing. They don't get everything right in this car though. One thing that I don't like is the lack of storage. The glove box is an okay size, but in most cars you get a center storage area, which is quite large, and that's not the case in this car. All you get is this very small area for storing, I don't know, maybe a mobile phone. And one of the downsides with that, apart from the lack of size, is that it's hinged on the right hand side. So as a driver, I can't actually see what's inside here because the hinge is on the wrong side. I think if this was a left-hand drive car, I'd be able to see what was inside there a lot better. But as it is, yeah, that's not the smartest design in the world. I'll tell you what's also not very smart. The user interface in this car. The screen looks beautiful, but some of the functionality is just maddening, specifically the heating, ventilation, and climate controls. Let me show you my least favorite feature. If you want to customize the airflow and the direction of the air, you've got these huge icons for pointing exactly where you want the air to go, but then the tiniest icon in the world for controlling the fan speed. That is literally, what, 6 by 6 pixels on a screen that is quite large. It almost feels like that was designed by someone who hates the user. The other thing I find really disappointing is the power and speed, or the lack of speed, from the air vents. I'll turn this up to maximum and you'll be able to hear. Yeah, that seems like it's blowing quite powerfully. It's not. Look at this. Got a little prop here. I'll hold it up in front of there. Can you see that moving? That is full force on the air conditioning, and it is barely moving this pink bow I got from John Lewis. It is absolutely rubbish. Having said all of that, the BMW iX2 is really nice to drive. The first thing you're going to notice when you jump in this car is how plush the suspension feels, especially in comparison to something like a Tesla Model Y. I drive one of those things most days, and I can tell you the ride is a little bit too much on the firm side. This, in contrast, feels plush. It rides the bumps really nicely, even on roads where there are loads of potholes. So well done to BMW on that front. This feels fantastic. The steering is something you'll also notice the minute you jump in this car. It's super light, like ridiculously light. Too light? You could argue that. Around town it's brilliant. It means you can maneuver very, very quickly, but when you're going around corners, it feels like you're driving a toy or a video game. On the flip side, maneuvering is super simple. So if you want to do a 3-point turn, I'll demonstrate that right now actually. You can do that, no sweat whatsoever. Look at that, it's nice and light. You can do that with one finger really. And also the speed at which this car changes gear between forward and reverse is lightning quick. So it's a surprisingly nimble car despite the exterior size. There's one more thing about the steering which is a bit contentious, I think, and that is the girth of the steering wheel. It's very, very thick. I mean, I've got big hands, so I can wrap my hands all the way around it, but I asked my other half what it felt like, and she could barely wrap her fingers around it. But I digress. I think this steering wheel is a little bit too thick. It kind of works on their M models, but on a family car, maybe there's a bit too much girth here. Sticking to the subject of ergonomics and anatomy, another thing I didn't like about this car was the fact that it doesn't come with electric seats as standard. These are manually adjustable. which is fine on a cheaper car, but when something costs as much as this, I really do think electric seats should be coming as standard. Now, I know a lot of you are going to be saying you don't need electric seats, but let's face it, this is a family car, and in families, you sometimes get drivers of different sizes, and it's really convenient having a car with electric seats that can adjust the seats and the mirrors for you automatically before you even get inside. Trust me on this one, it is an essential feature in my household. Do you know what I do like though? The sound of these indicators. Listen. Ooh, not the clicking, but the actual mechanical noise of the indicator. That is such a satisfying noise. It almost sounds like you're breaking a Twix. Click. Ah, that is lovely. Do you know what's also nice? The fact that you've got physical controls for the indicators and for the wipers. You don't get that on some cars. On the subject of sounds, this car has the My Modes feature, which lets you cycle through different driving modes. There's personal and sport. And in sport mode, the sound of the car changes to get you more involved with the driving experience. That's nice. There's efficient, which is totally silent, and then expressive, which sounds like this. It's my favorite. That's really cool, isn't it? And it works under both acceleration and braking. I love that. They've all been composed by the legendary movie score composer Hans Zimmer, and it kind of does make you feel like you're in a movie. It's a nice touch. There's actually something that I forgot to show you earlier on in this car, and it is the special digital art driving mode. It doesn't affect the way the car drives, but if you go into it, what it does is it shows you one piece of artwork by an artist called Cao Fei. It's called Quantum Garden. It was made in 2022, and it loads it up on the screen for you to enjoy as you drive. It even has an audio guide from the artist to explain what it is that we're looking at. And let's hear a bit of that, shall we?
My connection with BMW starts with the creation of the 18 BMW art car. With the digital art mode, we have the chance to cooperate again and integrate my art into the software of the car. I think it is a kind of a designate between BMW and me. The overall idea of my creation, Quantum Garden.
What a load of... The iX2 comes in a couple of versions. There's the eDrive 20 with 204 horsepower and front-wheel drive, and the xDrive 30 with all-wheel drive and 306 horsepower. The latter accelerates from 0 to 62 in 5.6 seconds. Again, slower than you know what, but what does it feel like in reality? Let's test it for real though, shall we? So I'll go into sport mode, that's good. Foot on the brake, foot on the accelerator, launch control active. The whole car starts to vibrate as the motors pulse. That's quite a cool touch. Release, yep, and we are moving. It's quite punchy. There's a lot of torque here. There are faster cars out there, 100%, but the pace is still quite respectable. This is worth talking about as well. There's a little boost paddle behind the steering wheel. You pull that and immediately the car feels much more ready to rock. That's where you get access to the full power and full torque for a 10-second period. It feels quite nippy, although to be fair, it does feel quite nippy pretty much all the time, even without that paddle. You can pull it over and over again, but once the timer runs out, it returns to whatever mode you were in before. Now, range. They reckon it'll do up to 279 miles. The reality is that in wintry British weather, around 7 degrees Celsius, the car indicates around 220 miles on a full battery. Around town, it'll average 3.5 miles per kilowatt hour, which works out to be 224 miles, while on a long motorway trip, it consistently delivers 3 miles per kilowatt hour at 70 miles per hour, and that works out to be 192 miles. Not bad, but not the best. All in all, I think the BMW iX2 is a pretty decent car. It's really nice to drive. It's just a shame the thing is so ugly. I mean, not ugly, it's just not great looking, is it? Do you know what, on reflection, I do think that what they've done is create a car that stands out in a sea of really boring crossovers, and ultimately, it's really nice to look at. Yeah, in all seriousness though, if you can ignore the fact that there is a bit of rust under the bonnet and that there are alternatives like the Tesla Model Y, which are cheaper, have longer range and are more spacious inside, then the iX2 is definitely worth considering. But who am I to judge? I am just a mere journalist. Let me know what you think in the comments down below, because I'm sure you're not influenced by this, are you? It's fake money, shut up.